Hello everybody, it's Patrick again from Intensive Care at Home, and in this week's blog I want to talk about my personal experience in the intensive home care nursing services field in Germany and why Intensive Care at Home delivers on its promises. So if you have followed my blog for a while, you may still wonder how intensive home care nursing services are possible, as intensive care is considered the most acute area in a hospital setting, and common beliefs are that the only way for a patient to leave intensive care is either to go to a normal hospital ward or to pass away in intensive care. And here I want to shed more light on my story and on my experience in the field in Germany, so that you understand what's possible and that you understand what some long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomy and their families miss out on, because some people haven't embraced the concept of intensive care at home nursing services as yet. When I first left my home country in Germany in 2003, where I did my nurse training and where I worked in ICU, and where I also worked in the intensive home care nursing services field, and I then entered ICU nursing in the United Kingdom, and then in 2005 entered ICU nursing in Australia, I was absolutely shocked and horrified to find that long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomy and their families had and still have nowhere to go to but to stay in intensive care indefinitely or end up with treatment limitations, as they still have nowhere to go to, and to stay in intensive care with no quality of life and or no quality of end of life. It didn't seem to occur to the ICU community that these long-term ventilated adults and children could be looked after at home with a massive improvement of their quality of life and or their quality of end of life, whilst also saving costs for the health system and freeing up ICU beds that could be used for other more acutely unwell and very sick patients. Next on the list of benefits is to improve the quality of life for the families of those long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomy, who often put their lives on hold while spending days and nights in intensive care, neglecting their personal and their professional lives. During my time in intensive care in Australia, I have always wondered why the hell most long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomy and their families need to stay in intensive care indefinitely with no quality of life for the patients and for their families. I just look at them and think, well, I have looked after a similar patient in the home in Germany, feeling very sorry for them and their families. Because I have personally worked as a critical care nurse in Germany, providing specialized intensive home care nursing services for long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomy and their families in Munich, I also see that there's a real need for such services that some people within the ICU community cannot see as yet, and it's outside of their clinical reality or clinical paradigm as yet. With my experience in the home intensive care nursing service world, I know what's possible for long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomy and their families if they are looked after by critical care nursing staff with the right skill set, but more importantly with the right mindset. Activities such as going to the movies, reintegrating children back to school, and just simply putting the clients and their families first in their own home outside of a clinical and sterile intensive care environment makes such a dramatic difference to their recovery, well-being, to their quality of life and or their quality of end of life. Families can focus on living their life as well, rather than spending day and night in intensive care. I have worked with a long-term ventilated child that we got back to school on a Monday to Friday basis, day in and day out. What a massive difference this made to the child's life. The alternative would have been an indefinite stay in ICU. I have also worked with a long-term ventilated adult with tracheostomy who we got back to work for 20 hours a week. In both cases, this was made possible because we had the right nursing skills, and most of all, we had the right mindset. We didn't limit a long-term ventilated adult or child with tracheostomy to the inhibiting and limiting intensive care environment, but rather we focused on possibilities and opportunities, whilst also saving money and resources for hospitals, for the Department of Health and for private health funds. You can find more information on our case studies section. A lot of things are possible in the home and long-term ventilated adults and for long-term ventilated adults and children, and they don't need all the backup and resources available in a clinical environment. It's often an overkill, and it limits their possibilities and their quality of life. More importantly, the risk of catching a hospital-acquired infection is simply not there in a home environment, as a lot of long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomy in ICU are more likely to catch an infection the longer they stay in ICU. You don't need a lot of resources to improve the quality of life of a long-term ventilated adult or child with tracheostomy. What you need is the right skill set and, more importantly, the right mindset. Intensive care at home has the right skill set and has the right mindset to improve the quality of life, and in some instances the quality of end of life for long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomy and their families in their own home. If you are a health professional in intensive care and you think you know a long-term ventilated adult or child with tracheostomy who would like to improve their quality of life and or their quality of end of life in their own home rather than intensive care, even if it's only to go home for a weekend, and if your organization would also like to save some money and resources along the way, or if you simply have any questions about our services, give us a call on 03 9939 7456 or just simply send us an email. Have a great day.